Okay. Oh, I thought that was an eager student who came in to join our class, but in fact, it was just somebody stealing. Was that my chair or is it a desk she stole? Oh, okay. All right. I still have my chair here. Thank goodness. I was going to be like, man, things are rough. Welcome, welcome. Okay. So let me share my screen with you guys and share my screen with the class, whoever will be attending online. And I wanted to first bring to your attention another excellent opportunity. I am sure all of you guys have gotten this email. And the reason I think it's a really important thing to highlight for you guys is because you're learning to do research. And even though so far we've just we've written an abstract, a title, and an introduction, you guys implicitly understood that those things are referencing data sources. Now, data, it's just a whole bunch of numbers in an Excel spreadsheet as far as you guys are concerned. So you might be wondering, well, where do I get this data? You might recall that Big Bad Banks takes its data from IPUMS, which is a data source. It's a place where you guys can go to IPUMS, and you can download a whole lot of data about Americans. It contains a tremendous amount of economic data, which is how they're able to get this income distribution stuff. Okay? Now, for you guys, you all typically research Chinese issues. You're not required to limit yourself only to Chinese issues, but that tends to be what students at WK research. And that's actually really good. A lot of things that have been studied in the American context have not been studied in the Chinese context. So if you could get a good database about Chinese citizens, about the Chinese economy, about the Chinese stock market, you should feel that that's an advantage for you. So here is an opportunity to do that. It'll be March 25th from this time to 15:30. So unfortunately, you'll be late to this lecture, but you can wait until the end of this class and then go and attend the remaining hour and 15 minutes. I might even let you guys out a little bit early so that you guys can be in attendance. But you can listen to a lecture from this person from CNRDS, and he or she, I believe it's a man, he will tell you guys what data he has available for you to use. He might have income distribution data. He might have some stock data. I don't even know what exactly he has, but the presentation will be in Chinese. So actually, it's not really for me because I don't speak Chinese. But there's a really cool opportunity if you attend this thing, right? All attendees will receive a complimentary access to the new CNRDS databases for 1 year. Okay? Faculty get two databases, which is why I'm unfortunately can't attend at all because I have a class right after this one. So I'm trying to figure out a way how I can get this data. And then so I would get two, and then you guys would get one. So you guys don't have to select right away. You can listen to his presentation about what data he has, see if that data corresponds to your research project, and if so, which database, and then you can ask for it. And you will get one, and all the faculty in the school will get two. I guess if we plan it out right, everyone will get a different data set, and then we have all the data sets, right? So if you have an idea now, which you should because you have an introduction and an abstract, you can go out and get data that attacks and addresses that idea. Even if you don't have a really strong idea now, just think futuristically for a little while. So in 2 years, you'll be writing your senior thesis in finance, accounting, marketing, and so on. And one of the ways that you can have that thesis really contribute to the literature is by presenting or using a novel or semi-novel data set. Now, gathering the data yourself is very work intensive. You remember when we talked about the professor that was giving a lecture here on a Big Bad Banks derivative paper, right? She constructed a data set herself by getting the balance sheets from big banks from 1925 to 1941, and then running regressions on that new database. But most people, including the people who wrote the Big Bad Banks paper, they don't make their own data. They rely on being able to get data from something like CNRDS. Okay, now I also wanted, while we're talking data, to make you guys aware of another data set that is available to all of you. And it's not a single data set. Similar to CNRDS, we have access to something called WORDS, WRDS. Did I mistype? Let me see. Yeah, okay, good. So, anybody used WORDS before? WRDS. Let's just search for what that is first before clearly you can see I have accessed it before. So, the Wharton Research Data Services. Who knows what that is? Well, what's Wharton? Believe it or not, in a couple of years, some of you may come back and you will ask me for a recommendation letter. And typically, if you got an A in my class, I will agree to write one. So a lot of people, a lot of you will actually be seeking a recommendation letter for your application to Wharton. So what is Wharton? It's a school, good, of, what do they teach there? Literature, art, music, music? Business, good. So Wharton is one of the best and biggest business schools in the world. Does anybody know currently their most famous alumni? That's right. Donald J. Trump graduated from Wharton. So I think in his first term, they viewed that as a positive. In his second term, they might view it as a negative. I don't know. But allegedly, we actually, when I was in graduate school, we had a speaker from Wharton come and present a paper, and he sort of mentioned that Trump was bringing positive publicity to their school. So that, again, that was back during his first term. So I don't know if that's the case now. But like many famous business schools and very, very top ranked, I mean, literally, maybe #1 in the world, these guys, they have a large data set library. And they're kind enough, in exchange for a fee, to give us access to it. And so all of you guys, I believe, at least I've confirmed this with my upper level students, and hopefully you, being sophomores, also have access to this. All of you guys can go and sign up for an account. And when you sign up for an account, there will be a whole bunch of data in there. For example, there will be CompuStat. CompuStat contains income statements, balance sheets, statement of cash flows for every publicly listed, publicly traded firm in the United States for, I don't know, 50, 60 years. So you can see how valuable that can be. I tried logging in for my other class and it didn't let me through because it said my two-way authentication is not set up, which is not true. It is actually set up on my phone, but I actually have to work with them to get through. In case you're wondering what's there, you see, you can actually go through and look at all of the data offerings, okay? And they're just tremendous resources there. Now, what you will frequently find is that you get in there, right? And you think, oh, problem solved. I'm going to get my data now. And then you find the data set that you want, okay? And then after you find the data set that you want, you discover that the data set has not been purchased by our university. So even though there's data there that you want, you can't access it. That's why this guy is coming, okay? He is basically giving away access to data that is not currently available to us at our university because our university doesn't pay the subscription. His business model is you guys will like his data and hopefully you will purchase a subscription into the future. Okay? So just the word to the wise, the access is just for 1 year. This is the challenge, okay? You guys get this data set access once you pick the right data set. And by the way, feel free to consult with me on what the right data set might be. I'm here to help you with that. You will get it, and then you'll forget to download the data set, or you'll download only a small fraction of the data set. And what happens after a year? Your access is gone. You try to log in and download the data set, even though it was completely downloadable before, it was completely visible before, now it's completely invisible and undownloadable. So don't put yourself in that position. If you see a data set that you like and you get access to it, make sure to download it. Yes, it might take 50 gigabytes. I've had a data set that was like 80 or 90 gigabytes one time. Yes, it takes time, but imagine how valuable this data set is. Another thing you should be aware of is once you download this data set, I'm sure you guys are aware, you can't just sell it yourself or go and distribute it to a bunch of people, right? I mean, you could actually be sued for that. So the data is proprietary, meaning that you can't just distribute it to anybody. So be careful, get the data access, but treat it ethically and responsibly so that you're not later held civilly liable for, millions of dollars for, distributing this data set negligently or something. I mean, I don't know if that's ever been known to happen. The truth is these data sets do get passed around, even to people without access codes, but just be aware that they're proprietary and you shouldn't just go and advertise on WeChat or something. Hey, for 50 RMB, I'll let you have a copy of this data set. Cannot do so. Okay? Everybody kind of on board with this? So it's an excellent opportunity. I know you guys are young. It's not required that you go. I strongly encourage that you go. My prediction is most people won't go. And then they'll come around to their senior thesis and they'll be like, darn, there was a data set that I could have used for this thesis that I don't have access to. And they'll look back and with regret. So I suggest you do go, you get this one subscription to a data set. You can probably wait to select the data set, and I encourage you to do so. Consult with me, consult with whoever else you want to advise you, and then select the data set that is right for you. Okay, that's that. Now, let's talk about a paper that I'm going to assign that wasn't originally on the syllabus, but I think will fit well with what we've been doing because it's a more contemporary paper. And that paper comes from the Journal of Financial Economics. Okay. Now, the Journal of Financial Economics is the #2 journal in finance. Journal of Finance is #1, Journal of Financial Economics is #2. To be honest with you, publishing in either journal is equally prestigious. It is a tremendous accomplishment. And I happen to know someone who has published in the most recent issue. And the reason I want us to study her publication is because it has a really good literature review and hypothesis development section. Not all papers have this. You will look at Big Bad Banks and you'll see that the hypothesis development and the literature review section, well, there's not a separate section for it. It just happens. The paper reviews literature as it goes along, especially in the first 3 paragraphs, and then it forms some hypotheses which it tests. Now, this paper here, which I will show to you guys, is better because what it does is it has a formal literature review and hypothesis section. So please feel free, okay, to download this paper, and don't just feel free, I really want you to do it. You saw how I found that it's so recent, if you just search for the name, you may not pull it up. Now, you notice it's only by one co-author, which is incredibly impressive. Remember the other one? There were 3 co-authors, many of them very connected. And this student actually published this paper in one of the top journals in the whole world before she graduated her PhD program. And the reason that I know that is I know Robin Lee personally. I have her phone number. I actually went to graduate school with her for a couple of years. So I know her very well. And I believe at a very early stage, she even asked me to take a look at this paper as she was working on it through her PhD program. So she is a scholar much more accomplished than me. Okay. I am honored to have been in her presence and to run into her at conferences from time to time. But I just want you guys to see how similar, in a sense, this paper is to Big Bad Banks. So that again, you guys are going to see this pattern of excellence that emerges. Now, I want to offer my first critique to this paper is that the title is not as catchy. Wouldn't you agree? I mean, Big Bad Banks, you're all going to remember that for the rest of your life. This title, I think it's good. It describes what's in the paper, but it's a little bit soft, all right? Face-to-face social interactions and local information advantage. Okay? So just looking at the title without reading the paper, it may be kind of hard to tell what the paper is looking at, but a face-to-face conversation is kind of what we're having now. You guys are here and I'm here and we can talk. If I call on you, you're speaking with me face-to-face. If we were a long ways from one another and we talked over Zoom, it wouldn't exactly be face-to-face. If we spoke over email or WeChat or some other messaging service, it wouldn't be face-to-face. So the idea here is that she is looking at the impact of face-to-face interactions on information advantage with respect, like you can't tell from the title, but with respect to trading stocks. The idea is that if you work for a famous company and I am a mutual fund manager and I speak to you face to face, I might be able to get some information from you about the company that will help me make a good trade, whether it's a buy or a sell, with respect to that company. And so we kind of know implicitly this information leaks out to people that are very well connected. And so she is going to measure the effect of that local information. The idea being is that if you're a mutual fund manager in Los Angeles, you have an advantage in gathering information about local firms. Maybe you see people who work for these firms at dinner, you go to church in the same church, maybe your kids play together, they go to the same school, things like that. And this allows you to have these face-to-face interactions in order to gather some information about these companies. Okay? Now, in this case, she is going to look at the COVID-19 setting. So let me ask some of the folks that are on their phones why that might be important to the face-to-face interaction evaluation. So, young lady on her phone over there, yes, you. So, what is the advantage? What effect might COVID-19 have on these face-to-face social interactions? As it turns out, paying attention in class pays dividends, if you will. See, come on, the whole paper is on the effect of face-to-face social interactions, which means that because you and I are face-to-face, you should be able to gather some information from me. But you're on your phone, so you're not receiving the informational advantage of the face-to-face correspondence. So, how would COVID affect this? What do you think? You have to try. You have to guess. Remember, if you don't guess, I put you up here with no laptop and no cell phone, and then you have to engage in face-to-face interaction. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, good. Leave your computer there. Come sit up at the front row. Yeah. Just leave your phone. Oh, no, yeah, just leave it there. It's perfect. Just come. You don't need anything. Just come sit at the front of the class, and then that will help you engage in the face-to-face social interaction, which will give you a local informational advantage with respect to the class. All right, perfect. Okay, what about you, young lady that was on her phone earlier? What about this face-to-face social interactions that may be impacted by COVID-19? Oh, that's a really good one. It's not quite what she has in mind in her paper, but that's possible. What else? Oh, that's good. That's a really psychological topic, right? If I can see all of your face versus just part of your face, right? Are you conveying the same information? Because the psychologists, or I don't know if the psychologists really say this, I've just heard it before, that 80% of communication is nonverbal. You can kind of gather what I have to say based on my tone and my social cues. So a mask might actually prevent that. And by the way, this is a paper that has something to do with psychology for sure. So there's an interdisciplinary aspect as well. You, young lady in the back, green hoodie that also seems to be on her phone, that doesn't know I called on her because she's on her phone. Get the lady next to you. How would COVID come into play with respect to this paper's title? Yeah. All right. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, leave all your electronics up there. Come on up and join us in the front row. You don't need your laptop or cell phone. This will help you listen a little bit. All right, anybody else? Does anybody want to venture a guess? All right. Well, you might be just leave your laptop. You don't need any electronics when you come up here because I just want your undivided attention. So let's read the abstract and maybe it'll give you guys a little bit of a hint. This paper examines the causal role of face-to-face F2F interactions in generating local informational advantages for mutual fund managers. Again, we're economists, so we like to say things in the most complicated way possible. Does anybody have a simpler way to interpret this sentence? No thoughts? Well, it's basically what I was kind of saying earlier. The idea is that we hypothesize, we believe there may be an informational advantage in a mutual fund manager. A mutual fund invests in a whole bunch of stocks and other assets. There may be an advantage in being in the same city as the companies in which this person invests. Okay. Now, we don't know for sure. This paper is going to test whether an advantage exists. And other papers have also looked at things like this that Robin cites. But you can see that the idea is that, hey, if I'm in the same area as a particular firm, I know more things about that firm than analysts who are in a different city. Okay? Now, how is she going to test this? By the way, just like Big Bad Banks, her first sentence is almost the same. Big Bad Banks, this paper looks at the impact of bank deregulation on income distribution. Okay? Here, this paper looks at whether there is a causal role in face-to-face interactions and this local advantage for mutual fund managers. Okay? So, you remember the second sentence in Big Bad Banks? They use bank deregulations from the 1970s until the 1990s as their treatment. So in the second sentence, Robin identifies her treatment. Using COVID-19 lockdowns as an exogenous shock. Okay, so Big Bad Banks uses branch deregulation. Robin uses COVID-19 lockdowns. What's a COVID-19 lockdown in the United States? What was the COVID-19 lockdown in China? Hmm. I'll call on people. Uh, you gentleman hiding in the back with the iPad. You, yeah. What was the COVID lockdown? Tell us about what happened in the United States. Oh no. Okay, COVID-19 lockdown. I've been talking about this for a few minutes now. Uh, so COVID-19 lockdowns. Okay, what is that? Good. Good. So that's the idea. And you guys can see that, you know, this happened in China, it happened in America, it happened in many other countries. And implicitly, just like different states have different laws about banking, different states have different laws about lockdowns. So some states, California, New York, very heavy lockdowns. Other states, Florida, Alabama, not many lockdowns. So you see, she is also, just like big bad banks, she's using cross state, cross time variation. So differences in differences, okay, in order to identify this effect. Now, you should also notice that her effect is not like her treatment is a little different because usually it's not the whole state of California determines this level of lockdowns. It's like the city of Los Angeles, the city of San Francisco. So it's a smaller geographic area, but she is still studying government action. Now, this is going to be a very common theme that you see in the literature. We study the actions of governments. Why? Because we believe the actions of governments are exogenous, meaning outside of the system that we study. So we believe that they're almost random. In fact, in her paper, she says, we use these lockdowns as an exogenous shock. So when she doesn't say quasi-exogenous, which means a little exogenous, a little not exogenous. She says exogenous, meaning I'm treating this thing as if it is completely random. Okay. And so you use government policy with respect to bank branch regulation as a random treatment. You saw it in big bad banks. You saw it in the paper that was presented as a job talk at this university. And now you're seeing a different government policy, lockdowns, used as a treatment. So she's going to use that as a treatment. And what is she going to show? I show that fund managers' performance on local stocks declined relative to distant stocks when in-person meetings were curtailed, driven by impaired investment timing rather than changes in firm fundamentals. Okay, it's a big long sentence. Basically, she is saying, look, these guys that were in LA, they used to be really good at trading LA stocks. Guys that were in New York were really good at trading New York stocks. They were not, both of them were not as good as trading stocks headquartered in Kansas, which is far away from both LA and New York. So she is saying that advantage, that local advantage, went away a little bit during COVID. And she believes part of the reason it went away is because if I am that mutual fund manager in Los Angeles, I can no longer go out and meet people. You see? So that's the thought. All right. You guys believe it? Let's just stop there. Let's stop here. Do you believe her story? Now, you know it's published in one of the best journals in the whole world, and you know that I know Robin. And I will testify that she is one of the smartest people I know. But do you buy this story? Pretend you're at a conference and your job is not just to listen to this, but you're the discussant for this paper. And you have to discuss some potential flaws in the paper. And you've only read two sentences, which between you and me, frequently, that's all some of these discussants read. But you've read two sentences. Does anything throw up a red flag? You, young lady next to the guy with iPad. Yeah, you. All right, what do you think? Are there any red flags here? Do you believe this story 100%? Is there anything that gives you a little bit of pause? Perfect. Publish as is. But no, I'll give you 5 seconds like everybody else. 5, 4, 3, 2. That's a good question. Any thoughts what investment timing might be? So that's kind of central to her paper. She's demonstrating, you know, that this is kind of a leakage of information from the firm. So just so you guys know, firm fundamentals are the numbers that the firm publishes in its financial statements. So on the balance sheet, it will say we have $10 billion in cash. We have X million dollars in accounts receivable, things like that. It'll talk about the income statement. It'll talk about the statement of cash flows, things that you guys will learn about in future classes here at WKU. And you see, Robin is saying the fundamentals of the firm, these statistics that the firms are required to publish every quarter, they're not what's driving it. Now, that's important for her because think about it. The fundamental releases, they happen for everyone at the same time. Whether you're in Los Angeles, in New York, or in Kansas, you wake up one morning, or maybe the release occurs in the evening, and then the quarterly reports are available. So that those would not give you an informational advantage based on where you are. Okay, because everyone in China and America gets these reports at the same time. So you see, she's pointing out, like, hey, wait a minute, they don't get any worse at interpreting the information that is available to everybody. They only get worse at interpreting information that is local, or perhaps they get worse in receiving information that is local. Now, your second question is really good with respect to timing. Here is what I think it means. I think it means, and we'll read deeper into the paper just to be sure, but I think it means that the investors used to be really good at buying the stock right before the stock went up, and really good at selling the stock right before the stock went down. And so the local guys were better at that than guys in different cities. But now they're not good at it anymore. They're just as bad as the other guys, or at least close to as bad as the other guys. So what do you think now? Do you buy this story now that you know what that means? Yeah, you. No, the lady behind you still. Huh? So do you buy her claim in her second sentence? I mean, do you think it's believable? Yes. Okay, why?
they offer some the trust and build this can deliver the information. I think
Trust can deliver the information. Okay. Are you saying that people they don't trust each other as much if it's not face to face?
oh
Oh, okay, okay. So you're saying when you viewed my lectures, did you watch my online lectures? Okay. Did you trust me less in the online lectures than you trust me now? Really? Oh, okay, okay. So it actually made a difference. Okay, I'm surprised though. I mean, this is good feedback, but it is interesting to me that, that would make a difference because it's still the same person saying the same, well, roughly the same information. Okay, all right, nothing wrong with that. Does anybody disbelieve this? Oh, you wait a minute. You came up with your cell phone. No. Only undivided attention. No, you have to put it in your pocket. Yeah, okay. What do you guys think? You, young lady in the corner with a water bottle. Yeah. Give us a reason we may not believe this.
same not face to face with each other, but we also can use like online to
Huh?
discuss with each other and to exchange the information. So I think it's not true.
No, that's a really good point. And I really, this is my objection to it, is that, if I'm a if I'm a mutual fund manager, let's say that I could improve my performance by 1%, knowing what I know about local firms. If I run $100 billion mutual fund, that's $1 billion a year, right? So if I can improve my performance that way, and all I have to do is just have some interactions, I would make sure that I found a substitute way to communicate. Okay, because this is a lot of money at stake, right? So to me, this story is a little bit because people find ways around these things. What else? These lockdowns. Now, I know in China, they were real strict. You would get into big trouble if you didn't follow the lockdown. What about in America? You think everybody followed this law? Yeah, people broke this law all the time. The governor of California, who had a lot of lockdown policies in California, was himself caught breaking the lockdown. So he's the governor of the whole state. He is imposing the lockdown, and he says, I'm not doing it. Okay? Now that's pretty remarkable, right? So the compliance rate, so basically it meant if you didn't have to go somewhere, you didn't go there. But if you really wanted to go somewhere, you went there and it didn't matter. So once again, there's $1 billion at stake. Do you think these guys are really going to say, well, we don't need to go down there and get that $1 billion? Because, what's the fine for breaking these lockdown rules? I don't know. You get a $200 ticket. Well, $200 versus $1 billion information advantage. That's kind of, most people would break this law. I mean, you guys know, or maybe you don't, I was in Los Angeles during this time. Actually, Rob and I were both at the University of South California when COVID-19 happened. And at that time, I was dating the young lady who later became my wife. And we broke these lockdown restrictions every time. I mean, how are you going to go on a date? You're not. So you're going to have to break these laws. So if I was willing, I mean, granted, she is my wife now, so maybe it was really valuable, right? But if I didn't know that was going to happen. If I was willing to break these lockdown laws in one of the toughest lockdown cities in the whole United States, just to go on a date, just imagine what these guys are willing to do. I mean, $1 billion? Lord have mercy. Another thing that happened in Los Angeles and in many other places like it is that the wealthy and affluent people began to hold their own parties. Okay? So, like, yeah, you weren't out in the public street, but you were at this party at Gavin Newsom's house and you could exchange all sorts of local information that you wanted to. All right. And the enforcement wasn't very strong. For example, like again, anybody been to Los Angeles? So outside of the University of Southern California campus, there's a very beautiful like flower garden. And there was one time my wife and I went on a date there, and we were there, no masks, completely breaking the lockdown restrictions out in public. And we were walking down the street, and 3 uniformed police officers were walking in the other direction. We were in complete violation of the law. Do you think a single one of those officers told us to do anything? No, they completely ignored us, right? So even though these lockdown laws in the United States existed, they were completely and totally unenforced in most instances. Now, it's true that there are situations where you can actually see people being arrested for not having a mask. So I want to bolster Robin's story a little bit. There were people getting arrested, but I would think that was the exception rather than the norm. At least having been in the heat of battle myself, we weren't really getting arrested. So that's the challenge that I would have to this paper, and that you should always be evaluating these papers like, how believable is the story? Because Robin would come back and she would say, well, wait a minute. The numbers say there was an effect. So you're saying you don't believe the effect, but the whole reason that we run these experiments is to test whether there's an effect. So just because you don't subjectively believe it doesn't mean it overrides all the numbers. And that would be a fair point also. But in a minute, I want to examine another assumption in this paper that may or may not be true and that may be leading to the skew in the numbers. What you guys should know, though, is that you should be aware of something called p-hacking, okay? And p-hacking is a term that means I run the calculation until I get the number I want. Because there are a lot of subjective choices you can make in how you run a regression. And let's say you run the regression and you didn't get your result. What can you do? You can make a little change, right? You can add a control variable, take away a control variable, and keep doing that until the result pops up, right? And statistically speaking, to get a result that is statistically significant at the 10% level, even if there's no real result there, if you run 10 regressions, one of them on average will come up with a result. Okay, so I don't think Robin did that, but I'm saying just because you have a numerical result, that also is not a slam dunk. Like, it's good that you have a numerical result, but it's also possible that you ran 1,000 regressions to get one hit. The other 999 ways you tried it, there was no result. The result that's in the paper is the one that worked, right? So we have to be careful about that because, again, we have to remember what are people's motivations. If you have a paper and the paper says, oh, I ran this experiment, there were no results, that paper is not going to get published. That's one of the biggest problems we have in economics, is this pressure to publish. And so we end up baking the numbers until they work. but that's not a reliable result. So Robin's counter argument, which is, but the result is there, may or may not be persuasive. But let's read the rest of the abstract just to be sure. I investigate two distinct benefits of face-to-face interactions arising from interpersonal cues. Okay, so she looks at trust building, which enhances the transmission of soft information. Soft information is kind of information that is not, let's say, in the financials. So it's not like a hard number. Tesla's income will be X next quarter. It's more like Elon Musk feels the company is going downhill. You can't really put a number to that, but presumably if you received that information, you would sell your Tesla stock, right? At least a portion of it. So soft information and impression management, which facilitates the transmission of favorable information. So it's kind of like the question I asked the young lady in the back. I was like, well, do you trust me more now that we're in person than if watching my videos? And according to her, she does. So that's actually, this right here, trust building, which enhances the transmission of soft information, presumably because she trusts me more in person. She's getting, this lecture is more informative for her. And then impression management, right? So the transmission of favorable information. Okay. Again, impression management is important. I mean, I presume you guys see I'm in a polo, I'm in formal slacks, I'm in dress shoes. Presumably, if I came in here, my shirt was ripped, the sleeves were off the shirts, I had tattoos covering my arms or something, right? I had a tattoo on my face, I had a mohawk, I was completely dressed informally. Whether fairly or unfairly, you might not trust me as much, right? I'm not saying it's fair. I'm not saying people with mohawks are untrustworthy. It's fine. I'm not saying people with tattoos are untrustworthy. But the results, when we look at how much do people trust people, a guy in a suit and tie, usually pretty trustworthy. A guy with gang tattoos, flashing gang signs, with a gun holstered on his hip, not very trustworthy, right? Now, I'm not saying that's fair or unfair. It could be the same guy just later on that day. You don't know what the guy in a suit does at his off time. But for whatever reason, people tend to trust the first guy a little bit more than they trust the second guy. Coincidentally, I think that there are some very interesting studies about like whether you're pretty or not. Okay. And so it tends to be that we trust pretty people more. Or maybe we want to trust them more, right? Because, they're pretty. Whereas, you get a person that doesn't look so great, you're like, person's untrustworthy. Again, I'm not saying this is the right way to think. Okay, I don't really think you should discriminate against people based on their looks, but that's the way biologically, psychologically, we tend to be wired. So, fairly or unfairly, impression management matters. Fine. Finally, the results cannot be fully explained by changes in internal informational flows or the use of public information. Okay? And are more pronounced for stocks in less transparent information environments and regions in regions with stronger social traits. Okay? So there she's basically saying, look, this effect is stronger if it's harder to get information about a stock. Okay? So the value of talking to a person who works in the company is greater if it's hard to understand what's going on with a firm otherwise. Does that kind of make sense to you guys? That should make a little bit of sense. I mean, if you know absolutely nothing about a company, like you don't even know what product they make, meeting an employee for lunch and finding out what it is that they do there, that's tremendously important. You went from knowing nothing about the firm to quite a bit just from a small conversation. On the other hand, if it's a firm where every bit of information about it is widely available, what are you really going to gain from talking to the person who works there, right? Even if it's an upper level, an upper management person. Okay, so that's her abstract. Now, we're going to skip the introduction, even though you guys can read it to see how an introduction is written. And what we will do during the class is we're going to look at this section. Now, what we call this section in your class is literature review and hypothesis development. But a lot of fancy journals, like the Journal of Financial Economics, like to call it something else. So here they'll say conceptual framework and hypothesis development. In the Journal of Finance, they don't even have an independent section for it, usually. Okay, Journal of Finance usually has like 3 sections. So the reason we set a section apart for it is because we just want you guys to know how to write that specific thing, okay? If you end up publishing in a great journal like this, the editor will say, hey, move this here, and you'll just do it because you're so happy to be published in this journal. So, happily here, even though it's called conceptual framework, it's really a literature review. If you look at all these literatures that are being cited here, right? Okay, citation, citation, citation. And she is describing what all of these citations say. At the end of these citations, she presents a hypothesis. Now, a hypothesis is just an educated guess. You believe this is what the results will show. Then you run the regression, and the results either confirm or disconfirm your hypothesis. Okay, so that's what Robin is going to do here. And she's got one hypothesis here, and then look at the impression management. You heard me talk about that from the abstract. And then she does a whole bunch of literature review there, and then she forms a second hypothesis. So you guys can see that her hypotheses, like a hypothesis is an educated guess. What is the guess educated by? Well, it's educated by the prior literature. Frequently, there's kind of an economic theoretical framework. Sometimes it's mathematical. They literally do calculus. Okay, and other times it's just stated in writing what you expect to happen and why. So for her, she is having to use prior literature to articulate some economic reasoning why we might expect there to be an effect. And we already talked about that in this class. Why would we expect there to be an effect? Well, it's true. I can gather some information by talking to someone who works at a particular firm that cannot be gathered through fundamental analysis. So that gives us some economic intuition for why there might be this local advantage and why that local advantage might dissipate when you bring in lockdown restrictions. And then we also talked about the countervailing economic ideas. So the fact that, there are billions, tens of billions of dollars, maybe hundreds of billions of dollars on the line. Do we really expect these mutual fund managers to not seek out this information? I mean, if the claim really is that, they are, how would I say, they can no longer spend social time with members of these firms, these local firms, well, then they have some additional time to otherwise engage in research, right? So would they really, just quit trying to gather this information? All right, let's look at hypothesis 1 real quick. The adverse impact of losing the F2F channel is more pronounced for stocks with low levels of generalized trust between corporate executives and fund managers. Okay, so give us some intuition there, someone. Why would there be this relationship between low levels of trust between corporate executives and fund managers and how that impacts their face-to-face interactions? You, young lady in the fun day hat. No, the lady in the hat. You. What do you think? Why does this local information advantage, why is it more pronounced when there are low levels of trust between the executives and these fund managers that Robin is studying? What do you think? Well, let me ask you this. Let's pretend the young lady in the green jacket is someone who you distrust. Okay, yes, you're the untrustworthy party in this case. And then the young and then the young lady giggling next to her in the leopard jacket, you trust a lot. Okay, or you trust a little bit more. And let's pretend the young lady in the leopard jacket works for the young lady in the green jacket. Okay. Now, the young lady in the green jacket comes to you and she says, everything is perfect. Everything with this firm is running great. It's going to the moon tomorrow. The stock, it's going to take off. Okay. Now, what value is that information to you if you really don't trust her? No value, right? It's useless. Yeah, she is saying that this thing is going to skyrocket to the moon, but she's completely untrustworthy. So the thing, instead of going up, might go down. Okay, now you're going to have lunch with a young lady in the leopard jacket. Now you trust her more. Okay? And she works for the lady in the green jacket. Couldn't you ask her, hey, your CEO told me this stock is going to the moon. What do you think? All right? And wouldn't her opinion be more useful to you? And part of the reason I would say is because she works for the lady in the green jacket, right? Exactly. Now, if it was just a random person, like let's say you trust your mom very much, right? Okay. If you ask your mom about the company, you trust your mom a lot, but she has no information about the company, right? So even though the trust level is high, what your mom tells you is not going to be helpful. The lady in the green jacket, she has a massive amount of information about the company. She's the CEO, but you don't trust her at all. So even though she has a lot of information, there's no way for you to get that information accurate. So then you need a happy medium between the young lady in the green jacket and your mom. And that happy medium is the young lady in the leopard jacket. Because now all of a sudden, you have somebody that you both trust at least a little and that has the information. Okay. So that's the basis. Thank you. That's the basis for this hypothesis, right? The idea is that the young lady in the leopard jacket was tremendously useful to the mutual fund manager, and being able to meet her for lunch, for drinks, for coffee, the mutual fund manager was able to get that information from her, right? Now you're on lockdown. You can't see her anymore. Now it's just your mom and maybe the CEO every once a quarter. But both of those sources are untrustworthy. The mom is trustworthy, but she just doesn't know anything about this company. And the lady in the green jacket, she knows a tremendous thing about this company, but she is completely untrustworthy. So you need that insider information to make sure the CEO in these low trust companies is being kept honest. All right. So next class, well, I guess I forget. Do we have the library session Wednesday or next Monday? Wednesday. Okay, so not next class, but the class after next, we'll read the actual abstract. And then you guys are not the abstract, the literature review. You guys will practice writing one as well. But, you guys can see this hypothesis has logical backing, even if we don't know what the sources say. We can just think about it and it kind of makes sense to us. All right, let's look at hypothesis 2. The adverse impact of losing this contact with a young lady in the purple jacket is more pronounced for fund managers' buy decisions than for their sell decisions. Okay. Now, this to me doesn't seem as intuitive. Like, why would it matter? Right? I want to know that the stock is about to go up, then I buy. If I learn that the stock is going to go down, then I sell. So this to me is less intuitive, and probably it has something to do with the structure of mutual funds and this particular economic setting that makes it that way. This is why it's very important for us to read what's above to kind of get to see if we agree with that hypothesis. I mean, for sure we can test it. But, is what we're testing, does that make sense? You might have a hypothesis that the earth is flat, but if it's sort of a hypothesis that's almost definitely going to be false, then you haven't really set up anything interesting that we're testing. We're going to test the flatness of the earth, and we're going to disconfirm that hypothesis, and so problem solved. Here the hypothesis is a little bit more interesting. I wouldn't know why it would impact the buy decisions more than the sell decisions, but I guess we're going to find out when we read this paper. So, all right, let's talk a little bit about the library trip. I don't know what will happen. We'll just go to the room and the librarians will present to you. Hopefully, what you guys will learn, and if you don't learn it from them, you'll learn it from me, is how to find literature like this, right? I mean, first of all, if you have a topic that you want to keep, okay, so you like your abstract, you like your introduction, you want to keep that topic. You want to go find literature on that topic to see if anybody has done it before. Because, you're going to find there are tens of thousands of economic papers being published every year. If that's the case, maybe somebody already explored your topic, and then you have to pick a slightly different topic. Because you can't write the same paper twice. I mean, unfortunately, you can, but it just won't get published. All right. Also, even if you don't find a paper directly on your topic, it is okay with me if you switch your topic. Like your hypothesis development and literature review can be on a different area. Now, why do I do this? I think most people don't. The reason I do this is because I actively am involved in research. And what you learn when you do research is you start with one idea when you begin, and it's like a way different idea by the time you're submitting to conferences and submitting to journals. That happens. You find papers that preempt your study, meaning it's already been done before. Or you find papers that give you different hypotheses and you want to analyze different dependent variables. You might discover that your treatment is a little bit endogenous, and so you pick a different treatment. So it's okay to switch. At the end of this class, you'll have basically a handwritten essay, but it's okay for different sections of the essay to be wildly different with me. I just want to make sure you have the skill to write this for your senior thesis. Okay. And that means, changing topics. Probably it will be even more helpful for you because now you get to research 2 topics instead of 1, just to see what data is available and what literature is available. So just be prepared to do that. All right, finally, endogeneity. Endogeneity is the opposite of exogeneity. Robin would say, well, my numbers work. And somebody would try to challenge those numbers. Now, exogenous means from outside of the system. Aliens come down from space. They're completely outside of Earth. They pick at random which cities will have a lockdown and which cities which will not have a lockdown, and then we run the experiment. That's an ideal setting. That's exogenous because those guys are not involved at all with the economic or financial system of the United States. They pick the cities at random, and we have random assignment. Do you guys think lockdowns are exogenous? The claim here is that they're completely exogenous, not just a little bit, just exogenous. By the way, it's a word we love. So in economics, if somebody says your shock is exogenous, that's like a really high praise. And if they say your shock is endogenous, that's like an insult. It's like slapping someone with your glove in an economics conference. I said that word one time because I'm an honest person, and somebody's topic was endogenous, and this scholar got very upset with me because I said endogenous. Now, we all knew that it was a little bit endogenous. But it was the fact that I had said it. I mean, I made peace afterward, and she actually works at a better university than this one. So I guess I'm the person that was ultimately wrong. She works at CUHK Shenzhen. So I guess maybe she was right and I was wrong. But nevertheless, endogeneity is something you want to watch out for. Now, I have written plenty of endogenous papers. It's hard to avoid in some instances, but you try to go for exogenous shocks. All right. Why may it not be exogenous? Are aliens selecting cities at random where to have a lockdown? No, right? I mean, first of all, you're going to have lockdowns in cities that are most affected by COVID, right? You're going to have lockdowns in cities that have a Democratic political leaning versus a Republican political leaning. Moreover, sometimes government officials are like, yeah, they're sort of endogenous in that they were elected by the locals, but they're kind of separate from whatever we're studying. Here, mutual fund managers are really well connected to American politicians and have great influence through lobbying. So the trouble is that, this isn't that exogenous because wealthy mutual fund managers and other powerful people may actually control which places get the lockdowns. Okay. And then you have a situation where, there's not random selection. And random selection is important. If you don't have random selection, you can't really know that the effect is the effect of the treatment or the effect is a result of the differences between the cities we're looking at. Okay. And, that's important. So we'll talk a little bit more about this during the research design section. I want to, though, counter argue on behalf of Robin here. She would say, but Professor Zhukov, what you don't know, or what you should know, is that changes in law are typically considered exogenous. Even though you and I kind of know they're not, it's considered an okay treatment in economics. All right? So we make this assumption that it's all right. It's not perfect. That's why a lot of economic studies, most of them, they have significant weaknesses and may be untrustworthy. But it's the best we've got in most instances. So we're going to go with it. So for you guys, if you find a change in law, you're golden. Okay, if you find a change in law that you want to study, that's your response. Like, yeah, it may be a little bit imperfect, but traditionally this has been considered an exogenous shock in finance. And then whose paper do you cite? You cite Robin's paper. You say, hey, look, she says it's exogenous, and I say so too. Okay. All right, questions, comments, testimonies. You're free. All right. You got your ID back there?